Welcome to the debate. Today's focus is on the philosophy of freedom from the known by Krishnamurti, and this show was researched by Sachin Karnik. Imagine you could completely hit a factory reset on your brain.
Right, just wiping away every trauma or, every religious or societal belief you've ever been taught.
Exactly. Would you finally see the world as it truly is, or would you just lose your mind entirely? That is the radical cliff edge that Krishnamurti pushes us toward.
He really does. He's basically telling us that all human conflict, our suffering, our division, our fear, comes from our obsession with the known. And by that, he means our accumulated psychological past.
Yeah, and the central question we are exploring is whether authentic psychological liberation can only be achieved by completely abandoning that known. Or conversely, is freedom actually found through the mindful integration of our cognitive frameworks?
Right, rather than total cessation.
Exactly. Now, my position is that reality, the unknown, simply cannot be captured by a mind burdened by the known. We have to completely drop it.
While I contend that cognitive structures and accumulated knowledge are inextricably tied to human consciousness, you can't just eradicate the past. You have to understand it and integrate it.
Well, let's look at the mechanics of this. We all use knowledge to navigate daily life, obviously. You need to remember where you live and, how to do your job.
Right, the functional stuff.
Yes, functional. But the trap springs when we use that knowledge to build a psychological identity. We take our history, our opinions, our religion, and we glue them all together to create this illusion of a permanent self.
Because, that gives us a sense of security. It gives us an anchor.
But it's a false security. It's entirely driven by the terrifying fear of inward emptiness. Krishnamurti argues that to be truly free, we have to stop relying on these psychological anchors.
But a total eradication of our psychological past is, practically speaking, a conceptual impossibility. You just can't surgically separate our functional reality from our psychological reality.
Why not?
Because they bleed into each other. If you want true freedom, you don't magically obliterate the past. You look at metacognitive frameworks. Take internal family systems, or IFS, which the research dives into.
Right, the therapy model.
Exactly. In IFS, you don't destroy your conditioned parts. You talk to them, you recognize them, and you use your intellect to untangle them and find balance rather than expecting some sudden cessation.
But see, any psychological method like IFS requires effort. And Krishnamurti points out that effort is just the ego trying to achieve a result. It's the known trying to control the known.
I don't see how that's a bad thing if it leads to healing.
Because it maintains the illusion of a controller. He uses this great analogy. If you see a bottle labeled poison, you don't agonize over whether to drink it. You don't need a therapy session to negotiate with the poison.
Oh, wow.
Right? The direct perception of danger stops the action effortlessly. The mere perception of the falsehood is inherently liberating.
Wait, no, that poison analogy actually proves my point perfectly. You cannot read the word poison without past memory.
Well,
You have to know the English language, recognize the skull and crossbones, and understand human biology. Therefore, seeing the false as false relies entirely on the very accumulated knowledge he tells us to discard.
I think you're conflating functional knowledge with psychological knowledge there. Yes, obviously, you need memory to read the label that's functional.
But it's still the known.
It is, but using knowledge for psychological comfort is what breeds conflict. He's saying we need to see the danger of our psychological attachments, just as we see the physical danger of arsenic. The mind has to be a blank canvas, psychologically speaking, to experience reality.
Okay, but how are you supposed to actually do this in real time without relying on your cognitive training? If you've ever tried to meditate, you know exactly what this feels like. You try to force your mind to be quiet, and you just end up in a wrestling match with your own thoughts.
Which is exactly why he says no effort.
Right, so he offers choiceless awareness, which is observing without judging or having a motive. But that sounds profound while being practically indistinguishable from highly disciplined cognitive restructuring.
I have to disagree there.
But it is. You're still using your brain's cognitive muscles to recognize a distortion and let it go. It's like cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Freedom comes from untangling our beliefs step by step, not a sudden mutation of consciousness.
Not quite. Because in a standard therapy, like CBT, you're creating distance. You say, a part of me is angry. You become the observer, and the anger becomes the object.
Which gives you the space to process it.
But Krishnamurti argues that very separation, the observer judging the anger, is exactly what creates psychological friction. He says the observer is the observed.
Meaning what, practically?
Meaning when you realize you are the anger, you stop trying to control it and the conflict just effortlessly collapses. If you rely on a method, you're just modifying the cage of conditioning, which just creates a more comfortable cage.
A comfortable cage is better than spiraling out of control.
But it's still not truth. Think of it like this. Drawing on Sachin Karnik's research regarding the university chemistry departments, Harvard doesn't own gravity, right?
Right.
You don't need to enroll in a university to drop an apple and see it fall. In the same way, Krishnamurti argues that no therapeutic framework or religion owns the truth. We must step outside the institution of our conditioning entirely, bypassing time and psychological effort.
That is a beautiful thought, truly. But what happens when you step completely outside the institution of societal conditioning? Because the known isn't just our personal baggage, it's the shared glue that holds civilization together.
I mean, is it really holding us together, though?
I think so. If you completely wipe away all collective identity, no shared history, no national or ideological goals, human ambition collapses, society fragments.
Exactly. And maybe it should collapse, at least in the way we currently understand it. Because personal ambition, like trying to get rich and powerful, and impersonal ambition, like dedicating yourself to a nation or an ideology, are structurally identical.
I don't think most people would equate personal greed with fighting for a civil rights movement.
But fundamentally, they both stem from that same terrifying fear of inward emptiness and loneliness. So we merge our fragile little egos into a giant collective cause to feel safe. By dropping the known, we drop these divisive ambitions and enter a state of spontaneous creative being.
I really question the viability of a society completely devoid of collective, impersonal ambition. Identifying with a larger cause provides the necessary cohesion for human survival and progress. You can't run a civilization on spontaneous, motiveless action alone.
Isn't it true, though, that impersonal ambition is actually more dangerous than personal ambition?
How so? Well, a greedy person knows they're being selfish, but a person acting on behalf of a noble ideology will justify immense cruelty and collective aggression as a glorious duty.
That's a fair point. It proves that identifying with the collective known is the actual root to human conflict. Wrapping your ego up in a flag or a religion just so you don't have to feel small is what drives war.
I completely concede that unexamined collective identity can lead to atrocities. History is full of people doing terrible things in the name of a collective known. But I still argue the solution isn't to burn the map entirely.
Then what is the solution?
We have to use our intellect to understand our conditioning. We have to recognize those parts of ourselves and harmonize them, utilizing the intellect rather than discarding it and hoping for a miraculous cessation of the past.
And I maintain that humanity's psychological suffering will only end when we cease using the past as a psychological anchor. We have to embrace the radical freedom of the unknown.
The tension here is definitely undeniable, but I think we certainly agree on the source material's profound premise.
Yes, absolutely.
Namely, that unexamined societal and religious conditioning creates conflict, division, and an illusion of a permanent self.
We just respectfully disagree on whether the solution is a sudden, total abandonment of psychological knowledge or a continuous, structured integration of it.
Precisely. Viewing consciousness and identity through multiple lenses offers an immense amount of value. There is a vast amount of depth remaining to explore in J. Krishnamurti's Freedom from the Known and the accompanying research.
I couldn't agree more. This discussion leaves a lot for all of us to reflect on regarding our own relationship with the known. Thank you for listening.